This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about a plan to seize your banking account. Now, one of the ethical dilemmas of being a YouTuber is this constant temptation to come up with clickbait headlines. But one of the good things about being a finance YouTuber these days is that the world has gone so crazy, I actually don't need to come up with clickbait. I can actually report on real news stories, and they're so crazy that they sound like clickbait. Now, in the US, we've been relatively immune from bank seizures. This is a very common thing around the world. I'll give you the example of Cyprus back in 2013 when they had what was called a bail-in, where people with less than 100,000 euros in their accounts basically had money confiscated from those bank accounts overnight by the government. They called it a one-time tax up to 6.75% if you were under 100,000 euros. Those with anything more than 100,000 euros had to pay almost 10%. This is outright confiscation. This is not a tax that someone could have planned for. This was basically the government taking money directly out of your bank account. And we're now reaching the point in the US where we are approaching a similar thing. There's a fight currently going on over Saule, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name, Omarova. And this is a fairly obscure story that you may not have heard about, but it's extremely important, especially if you have a banking account in the US. And by application, this is really a risk wherever you live, whether it's Europe or Australia or Canada. Now, Saule Omarova is an attorney. She's an academic. She's a professor at Cornell Law School. And it just so happens that she used to attend Moscow State University when the USSR was still around, so during Soviet Union times, and she actually won the Lenin Award at the Moscow State University. Now, I don't want to make too much of this because there were many very good people in the Soviet Union who had to climb up through the system, and part of that involved participating in winning awards like this. So it doesn't necessarily mean that she's a communist or a Marxist. I think what we're going to see is that she's actually much more dangerous than one of those things. She's currently been nominated by President Biden to serve as the head of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC. Now, this is a bureau that is within the U.S. Treasury, and it's very important because they basically are the bank regulators. They charter, regulate, and supervise all national banks and thrift institutions. So if she got this position, she would be in charge of more than 1,000 U.S. banks. Just a couple years ago, actually, I think it was just this month. I take that back. In October, she published a research paper in the Cornell Law School journal called The People's Ledger: How to Democratize Money and Finance the Economy. This sounds great. Who doesn't like democracy and who doesn't like money? But when you read the abstract to her paper, the real line that jumps out: democratizing access to central bank money. So basically to the worst form of money. And what this means, of course, is let's make sure that no one can escape from the central banker's grasp. I'm going to go into the details of this paper, and I think you're going to be completely shocked by them. But before I do that, I'd ask you, if you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button and share this video with a few friends. What's going on in U.S. politics right now and in the U.S. economy and with our Federal Reserve is completely unreal, and our only hope is for as many people as possible to learn about this. So please share my video widely. So let's summarize some of the main points from this paper. I'll link to this paper so you can read the whole thing if you want. I found it too boring to read the whole thing, but there are some points that really stand out that are completely shocking. So step one under this, and again, this is sort of a working hypothesis that she has, but you have to realize that if someone like this has these sort of proposals, and they're nominated to this position, there's a very good chance that some of these proposals that are just academic speculation could end up being carried out. This is, of course, what happened with money printing and quantitative easing at the central bank. So one of the first steps in her paper is you basically move all the commercial banks. So whether you bank at Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or JP Morgan, move all of these bank accounts to the Fed itself, and they'll be called Fed accounts. And this would mean your checking account, your savings account, would be held directly at the Federal Reserve rather than by one of the Federal Reserve members like Wells Fargo or Bank of America. This is the first step. And she talks about that we could either make this optional or we could make this mandatory. And she says the more effective option would be to transition all deposits to the Fed. This would look a little bit like Social Security. When you're born, you would automatically be given an individual Fed account. Sounds very ominous. And these would be credited with things like government transfer payments, Social Security, tax refunds, etc. Ultimately, of course, these would be expanded to include all of your banking, your payroll, your savings, your spending, etc. Everything would be monitored through these Fed accounts. And it's unclear whether these are central bank digital currencies or some sort of parallel system. But this is the first step, and we're going to see why she would want this. And that is in step 2. And this is really where we enter the piece that deals with confiscation. Step 2, allow the Federal Reserve, which is the U.S. central bank, to confiscate part of your savings account if it will help them with their central banking monetary policy. Monetary policy is just the decisions that go on at a central bank surrounding interest rates, where they should be set, money printing, all this manipulation and central planning that should not exist. Here's the piece in her paper that talks about it. Implementing a contractionary monetary policy by debiting Fed accounts, this basically means by confiscating some of the money in your savings account, would likely, she realizes that the downside is this would cause political fallout from what is likely to be perceived as the government taking away people's money. This is, in fact, what they would be doing. First, they would trap you by having an account at the Fed, and then the central bankers would have this power to destroy part of your savings in order to decrease the money supply. She says, of course, this tool would be reserved for only extreme and rare circumstances, blah, blah, blah. But we know how this works. Once you give the government a power, it will be used more and more frequently. So this is extremely scary. This is very much like what happened in Cyprus, but this paves the way for it happening on a much more frequent basis. Step 3, empower the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the FRBNY, which is already a very, very corrupt and powerful branch or member of the Federal Reserve. They're this powerful because, of course, this is they're seated right on Wall Street, and this is where all the influence happens on the Federal Reserve through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But under Omarova's paper, again, we're still talking about this paper that's supposedly democratizing money. We can see what she thinks of democracy basically means, in her book, giving central bankers more power. Empower the Bank of New York, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, to manipulate stocks by shorting them. The Fed, as we've seen in multiple videos over the last 18 months, already manipulates the whole stock market by printing money. This is one reason the stock market has gone straight up since the beginning of the pandemic. But this step would allow the Fed to also short individual stocks and presumably buy individual stocks as well. And so in this way, this would allow the Fed to be able to pick market winners and market losers. And at this point, we really will have transitioned to a completely centrally planned and controlled economy. It's bad enough that the Fed manipulates the price of money and the supply of money in the form of manipulating the price of money in the form of interest rates. This already means that we don't have free market capitalism anymore. But this would really be the further end of it if the Fed were allowed to manipulate stocks by shorting them. This is where she talks about it's done under the guise of saying if there's a bubble, the Fed will address it. So if there's a bubble in mortgage-backed securities or tech stocks, the trading desk at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York would short these securities. Of course, this will be manipulated. The Fed has been very open to political pressure, especially over the past 10 or 11 years since the Great Financial Crisis. And if there's a policy like this, if the New York Fed is given this kind of power, there's no doubt that the Fed will be pressured at various points by politicians to short whatever is perceived as bad stocks. It might be oil stocks at some point. It might be green energy stocks at some point. It might be Bitcoin mining company stocks. Or it might just be the stocks of companies that have CEOs that speak out against the current president or against the government. This is a terrible, terrible precedent to set, to allow the central bank to openly manipulate and short individual stocks. This is worse than what happened really in the Soviet Union. Of course, they didn't have a functioning stock market when the communists were in charge. but we still do have a somewhat functioning stock market. This really would be the nail in the coffin for that. Now, will Omarova be confirmed? She seems quite controversial. She's getting a lot of bad press. I think it's unlikely that she's confirmed as comptroller of the currency this time around. But the fact that these ideas are being published in major law review journals and that they're being taken seriously by the mainstream press, Bloomberg seems to definitely, or the Bloomberg Business Week seems to side with her. And as a result, I think it's fairly certain that someone like Omarova, maybe not her in particular, because she does have this sort of red stain of having been in the Soviet Union and won these Lenin Awards, but if not her, someone like her will run the office of the comptroller of the currency this decade and will be in control of the U.S. banking system. Someone like this will be nominated simply because central bankers want to increase their control, and anyone who advocates for moving commercial bank deposits to the Fed is definitely going to get a lot of support from behind the scenes by central bankers. In addition to this, on sort of a parallel track, whether we go with Omarova's proposal or central bank digital currencies, some form of centrally planned control like this is coming. Central bank digital currencies are not just like your normal digital dollar that you have in your bank account. It would be an actual transition of the US dollar to a ledger-like system, something similar to Bitcoin, but a ledger that's closed. It's not available to the whole world to see, like the Bitcoin blockchain, but that is available to Fed officials to see. So basically, every time you spend, every time you earn money, the government and the Federal Reserve will be watching you. This is, of course, why Beijing loves central bank digital currencies, and they've already rolled out their digital renminbi, or it's sometimes called the CNY. This is their version of the CBDC, and they're far ahead of us. Of course, they love spy technology like this, and it makes sense that they would like something like this. But this sort of system of surveillance and control is certainly coming to the U.S., as we see by the fact that someone like Omarova, who's really a crackpot, is being seriously considered for the post of at the OCC. Again, CBDCs, they are not. I think it's important not to call them by some sort of technical name that whitewashes them. They are spy coins. And as I said, they will allow governments to view every single transaction that you make, to censor you, to target you, and ultimately to freeze your account at the Fed if someone doesn't like your politics. CBDCs will be the capstone of this surveillance policy. Cash will disappear, and it's already disappearing just really by preference. People rather use Venmo or some sort of electronic money. But CBDCs are much more dangerous than electronic money. They're highly trackable. And if we transition to this kind of society, it's a society of complete surveillance that will be very, very difficult to escape from. Just ask anyone living in China how difficult it is to live outside of their system or even to escape their country. Once you descend into this, you are going to have a lot of trouble getting out. In this world of Omarova type people, central bank digital currencies, Bitcoin offers one of the last forms of hope. It's permissionless, it's censorship resistant, it's decentralized. Money, you can send money to anyone you want, peer to peer. It's free of government surveillance and control. Your account cannot be shut down by the government because there are no accounts. And you can also, the other thing about Bitcoin is it gives you optionality. You can easily take your Bitcoin and move to a more friendly jurisdiction. This is very difficult to do with gold. You can't get on an airplane with bars of gold in your pockets or even gold coins without being monitored. But with Bitcoin, you can put your money on a hardware wallet. You can make a recovery seed backup, which is just 12 or 24 words in a certain order. You memorize those 12 words, and you could leave your country very easily with $1 billion or $10 billion or $10,000, whatever the amount, stored in your brain. This is why Bitcoin is so important. Bitcoin is freedom money. It's very, very important that Bitcoin wins. Meanwhile, we have this backdrop where everyone's talking about dog coins. Even people who are quite smart like Elon Musk, they're frittering away the opportunity, debating whether it's Doge or Shiba Inu coin. This is a complete disaster when this system of surveillance is being rolled out. People are being highly distracted by NFTs and by garbage crypto currencies. Bitcoin is the only way out. It's the only decentralized currency that's not controlled by a group of insiders like Ethereum is, or a corporation like XRP is, or Cardano is. And as I've talked about in previous videos, I believe the entire world is splitting into two tribes. And these are not Democrats versus Republicans or left versus white. These are two tribes that transcend normal political red-blue divisions. You have the sheeple, or the people who act like sheep, who are either by default, just by intellectual laziness or inertia, are embracing the surveillance state, or they're willingly embracing the surveillance state and doing everything they can on social media to promote this kind of garbage. And then you have free people, or freeple is someone gave me that coinage, who are actively fighting the surveillance state and are looking for freedom, are looking for self-sovereignty in money, in land, in community, in relationships. They don't want, and I would say we, because I'm part of this group, this tribe, we don't want central bankers' money. We don't want a surveillance state. We can see it coming. The writing is on the wall. The writing is getting closer and closer. And at some point, it's very important to realize this. This is why I keep harping on this on my channel. At some point, it's going to be too late to opt out of this new system, the system that's run by big tech, big government, and central bankers. The choices that you make today are going to have a profound influence on how your children and grandchildren live. It's still possible to acquire Bitcoin right now. It's possible to make choices, privacy choices, where you're not giving all of your data to big tech companies. And it's still possible to try to live outside of this coming system of surveillance. It's getting more difficult with every single day. So it's very important that you understand what's happening. I made a longer video about this called The End Game is Here, Humanity Hard Fork, where I talk about basically how the whole world is being divided into these two tribes. Basically the freedom-loving tribe, and then the tribe of people, sort of the normies who are willing to go along with surveillance. And they are basically the frogs that are being boiled slowly alive. They don't see these changes coming, but the changes have been very rapid. And with the consideration of people like Omarova and the entrance of central bank digital currencies, this call is becoming more urgent day by day. This trend toward the surveillance state is accelerating, and you need to understand that this is the real issue today. Not all the partisan squabbling, not all the altcoins that are garbage, not the NFTs, but this fight between central bank digital currencies, central bankers, the surveillance state, versus Bitcoin. This is the only battle in town, and you have to understand this, and you have to pick your side. If you don't pick your side, you're going to end up in the tribe of sheeple, and you're going to end up in what could be a multi-century prison. You just ask anyone in China how difficult it is to escape from their prison state. Something very similar is coming, I'm convinced, to the US and Europe as well. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And also, I would ask you, in addition to leaving comments below, check out the link below where you can join my email list. If for some reason I were to be deplatformed, I would like to be able to stay in contact with as many of you as possible. So check out that link and you can join my email list as well. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.